Welcome to Luke 21 Radio, a broadcast explaining biblical prophecy in the tradition of St. Augustine. And now, from Greenville, South Carolina, here's your host, Steve Wood.
Hello, this is Steve Wood, and welcome to Luke 21 as we study biblical prophecy together. And we're in a survey of the book of Revelation. And this survey is not an in-depth, every chapter, every verse survey. It's a beginner's survey for the book of Revelation. And today we are looking at Ezekiel and how Ezekiel influences the book of Revelation. In our last episode, I shared with you that the Old Testament is the key for understanding Revelation. And you know, those particularly bizarre portions of Revelation, which you think, like, where did this come from? Well, a lot of those bizarre references in the book of Revelation come from the Old Testament, and particularly the Old Testament prophets. So if you know what those meant in their context in the Old Testament, you might be well on your way to understanding some of the difficult portions of the book of Revelation. Now, I want to take you inside the Apostle John. I think it's really helpful when you're reading a book to try to understand the author. So in a contemporary world, after you read a book, it has a little section in the back about the author. Well, this is about the author. Okay, it's in Revelation chapter 10. And St. John hears a voice from heaven, and he sees a scroll with writing on it, and the angel is holding it, and he's commanded to take the scroll and eat it. Now, in case you haven't figured out, Revelation is filled with symbolic, metaphorical language. What does it mean to eat it? Well, it means to digest it. When you eat something, you digest it. In other words, it becomes a part of you. And St. John was one who had massive amounts of those Old Testament scriptures in his mind and heart. And then he's given a message here in Revelation 10. And the message, in a sense, is the book of Revelation. It's this prophetic message. But the reason, once you understand Revelation, it has punch. It has power. It has just a uniqueness to it if you really understand the book of Revelation. And I compare this to some bad things going on in our world. I don't know if you're aware, but both Protestant ministers and Catholic priests and deacons can download a prepackaged homily from the internet. And even worse, now you can get AI to write a sermon for you or a homily. Well, you can do that. You'll probably get away with it, but it's not too much more than hot air. Not just a good homily, not just a good sermon, but every now and then, you know, you might hear a homily or you might go to a conference and hear a particular talk that just seemed to have a punch to it, a power to it. And it's not necessarily loud or exuberant or exciting, but it's something that strikes you at the core. That's a prophetic message. And reason John has this impact in Revelation because he ate the scroll. He didn't just okay, I'll download some verses here, a little bit there, and put together the book of Revelation. He could have written a nice, cute little prophetic booklet or something. But no, this is something he took within himself, became a part of him, and it came with the power of the Holy Spirit as a prophetic message. Now, here it is. St. John, we're talking about the author. St. John is the New Covenant Ezekiel. Because did you know that in Ezekiel chapter 3, almost identical, God says to Ezekiel, eat what is offered to you. And he hands him a scroll. And he says to Ezekiel, Son of man, eat this scroll that I will give you and fill your stomach with it. And then after that, he tells him to go as a prophet to the people in exile from Israel and receive this word in your heart, hear it with your eyes and ears, and then go to the exiles, your people. Now, let me give you the top secret outline to the book of Revelation. If I gave you, let's just say we're in a Bible class, and if I gave you the take-home assignment, please go and outline the book of Revelation. Oh, man, I'd be getting calls late at night. This is impossible. How do you outline the book of Revelation? It's just like, it seems to be so scattered in visions and all this stuff coming at you. All right. An outline to the book of Revelation will show you how the book is organized and the purpose why it's outlined like that. And I'm going to give you here, in about 60 seconds, a complete outline to the book of Revelation. Okay? Chapter 1 is the introduction, some of the introductory themes, and that probably makes sense. And then chapters 2 and 3, you have 7 letters to churches in Asia Minor, which is modern Turkey. So chapters 1 through 3, the introduction, the 7 letters, and then the whole rest of the book. Chapter 4 to chapter 22 of Revelation is an outline following the book of Ezekiel. That's it. Revelation is a new covenant Ezekiel. And I have a handout for you that's going to be available on the homepage of BibleForCatholics.com. And you take a 60-second glance at this outline, and you'll forever look at the book of Revelation differently. And like, for instance, again, you start with Revelation 4 is where it picks up the outline of Ezekiel. So in Revelation 4, there's the vision of the throne of God in heaven. Revelation 4, that's Ezekiel 1. Then you find a scroll, Revelation 5, with writing front and back, Ezekiel 2. Then you have plagues upon the covenant breakers, Revelation 6, Ezekiel 5 through 8. The sealing of the foreheads of the saints, Revelation, Ezekiel 9, following in sequence. The coals of fire from the altar of God, Revelation 8, Ezekiel 10. The day of judgment is at hand, Revelation 10, Ezekiel 12. You getting this? The great city compared to a harlot is Revelation 17 and 18. That's Ezekiel 16 and 23. The first resurrection, which baffles 90% of commentators and commentating on Revelation. So you have Revelation 20 and Ezekiel 37. Gog and Magog battling the saints, Revelation 20, Ezekiel 38 and 39. The New Jerusalem, now we're getting to the end, Revelation 21, Ezekiel 40 through 48. The river of life, Revelation 22, Ezekiel 47. Boom, 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 right down the line in sequence. Revelation 4 through 22 is a new covenant Ezekiel. It follows the outline of Ezekiel. And this is really exciting. And again, once you look at it, it starts to make sense because St. John has digested Ezekiel. Ezekiel digested the message he would give. St. John, before this even occurred, it's really, really, really obvious once you dig into the book of Revelation that he had digested the message of Ezekiel, and then he's given this revelation by God that we read about in the opening chapter of the book of Revelation, and he can use the patterns of thought, the expressions, and even how do you describe the indescribable? He goes up to heaven a half dozen times. How do you describe eternity in the control room of God, the sovereign king ruling the universe? Well, he uses the expressions from Ezekiel. And so what seems so weird is already there for us. Ezekiel thought, and granted it seems a little weird in Ezekiel, but you can get a head start. And this is what the entire book of Revelation, after you get past the 7 churches, where it comes from. And the book of Revelation isn't just something of a summary of what Ezekiel taught. I want you to understand this. It follows the sequence, the organization of thoughts, but this is a new covenant Ezekiel. So it's a Christian rewriting of Ezekiel. Dr. Peter Williamson, who, in my estimation, has written the most helpful to people like listening to Luke 21 commentary on the book of Revelation for Catholics, said this: sometimes John signals that what he sees is the same reality that an Old Testament prophet foresaw, but that the eschatological fulfillment is different and greater than anyone imagined. In other words, the new covenant is much more great and grandeur than anyone possibly imagined in the old covenant, and John is trying to express this. I read a pretty long book. It was a 634-page doctoral thesis by a Catholic priest, Father Jean-Pierre Ruiz, and he wrote a doctoral thesis on Ezekiel in the Apocalypse, Ezekiel in Book of Revelation, what our theme is today. And he was the past president of the Catholic Hispanic Theologians in the U.S. But to me, the stroke of genius, there's like, say, three stages. Very simplistic, and Father Ruiz is certainly not simplistic. But then you get hyper complicated, and that's what his PhD thesis is, original languages and everything else. And then he was able, in less than a sentence, to summarize all 634 pages of his PhD thesis and summarize in just a few words what the entire book of Revelation is all about. He said, remember I talked about Revelation 10, John being commanded to eat the scroll and digest it. And then likewise in Ezekiel 3, Ezekiel ate the scroll and digested it. This is what he said, summarizing what was going on in the author's life and in his message in the book of Revelation. He said, John swallowed Ezekiel's scroll in order to write his own. It's not a duplicate copy, okay? Because there's different audience, different context, different background. But yet, Ezekiel had this primary influence on the composition of the book of Revelation. And so, you know, when people who claim to be prophecy experts have websites like Prophecy in the News and Prophetic News and all this, they're taking the newspaper and trying to interpret for you the reality of the book of Revelation. And really where we want to start is where St. John started. He swallowed Ezekiel's scroll. He digested. He had probably in memory the book of Revelation. And then when God showed him how the realities of what was promised in the Old Testament was unfolding in the New and what would happen at the end of the age, St. John used Ezekiel to express that for the New Covenant Scriptures and to round up our Bible. The book of Revelation is a fantastic book, just like the book of Ezekiel is a fantastic book. And rather than using the newspaper and make all kinds of false predictions, use Ezekiel like John did and understand exactly what the author was doing and what he intended. So, get your handout, Revelation, a Christian rewriting of Ezekiel. It's a free handout on BibleForCatholics.com. Just take a look at it in 60 seconds. Your view of Revelation is going to change immensely. I'm Steve Wood, your host, and you've been listening to Biblical Prophecy with Luke 21.
Luke 21 is a radio outreach of Family Life Center International. To learn more about biblical prophecy, visit us online at luke21.com.